So, Chrono Trigger starts out with this spiky-haired slacker getting out of bed. Let's call him Not Goku. Not Goku is on his way to see his inventor friend. Let's call her Not Bulma. Not Bulma is showing off her latest technological marvel at the Millennial Fair. But when we get there, she's still setting up, so we need to kill some time, and the fair is a capable accomplice. We can beat up this singing robot for some silver points, we can shake our booty to some prehistoric rhythms, we can eat this old dude's lunch, or help this little girl find her lost cat. As we run around the various attractions, we will eventually bump into this young lady. Not Chi-Chi? This gag is already running on fumes. The collision sends her pendant flying, and as we get up, we can either talk to her first or immediately grab this pendant. Whichever we choose, we will pick up the pendant eventually, and she'll prompt us to give it back to her. After a short bit, we're notified that Not Bulma's invention is ready to demo, but before we go, Not Chi-Chi wants to get some candy. We can wait patiently or try to hurry her along, but eventually it's invention time. Turns out, Not Bulma and her father have built a teleporter, but they can't seem to get any volunteers. We, as Not Goku, take the plunge, and lo and behold, the teleporter actually works. Whether or not this is a murder machine, I'll leave to the subject matter experts over in the Star Trek community to debate. Not Chi-Chi is excited to try it herself, but as the teleporter powers up, her pendant weirdly interacts with it. A portal opens and Not Chi-Chi is sucked in, and as the portal closes, she's nowhere to be found. All that remains is her pendant on the first teleporter pad. So where the heck did she go? Well, Not Goku is going to find out. He takes the pendant and follows in after her. You see, the question isn't where Not Chi-Chi went, but when. It's like this is a game about time travel or something. It turns out we're in the exact same geographical location, but 400 years in the past. As Not Goku, we stumble our way to the castle, where we're interrogated by knights until the queen calls them off. And, well, what do you know? The queen is Not Chi-Chi. It turns out the real queen of this time went missing recently, and Not Chi-Chi looks a lot like her. So they just assume she was the queen. This is all fine and good, but then, like that photograph in Back to the Future, Not Chi-Chi fades from existence. Uh-oh. Not Bulma eventually figures out what happened with her teleporter and catches up with us here in the past. Catching up to the past, does that make sense? Anyhow, she explains that Not Chi-Chi was actually the Princess of Guardia, hence her strong resemblance to the Queen of Guardia in this time period, and that the reason she faded from existence must be that the real queen is in danger, so it's up to Not Goku and Not Bulma to rescue her. We head west to a mysterious cathedral and meet up with this guy, who I was snarkily going to call Not Piccolo, but that doesn't really work, so he's Frog, just Frog. Frog, Not Goku, and Not Bulma fight their way through this cathedral full of monsters until they find the head monster. This guy's impersonating the Chancellor of Guardia, and is also the one who kidnapped the queen. We kick his butt in right order, freeing the queen and the real Chancellor. We then return to Guardia Castle, where Not Chi-Chi pops back into existence now that her ancestor is safe and secure. Afterward, our trio of Not Goku, Not Bulma, and Not Chi-Chi head back to their present time, and Not Goku agrees to escort Not Chi-Chi back to Guardia Castle. But no good deed goes unpunished, and Not Goku is arrested for kidnapping the princess, despite said princess saying it was all cool and everything. We're put on trial, and it's here that Chrono Trigger does something quite unique, especially for this era of game design. While on trial, what we did at the Millennial Fair before our little time travel escapade is used as evidence. Did you eat the old man's lunch? Well, you're a thief and can't be trusted. Did you grab the pendant before talking to Not Chi-Chi? Clearly, you coveted her riches. But wait, you helped the little girl find her lost kitty cat? Well, maybe you're not such a bad guy after all. Based on your actions at the Millennial Fair and your testimony on the stand, a jury of 7 NPCs will decide your fate, guilty or not guilty. And it's by majority, there doesn't seem to be the concept of a hung jury here in Guardia. So what this scene is telling us is that this game pays very close attention to our actions and choices as a player, and that these actions have and will have major consequences for us. The thing about this, though, is it's a goddamned lie. First of all, the outcome of this trial is utterly irrelevant. No matter the verdict, you're still detained in Guardia Prison, and the present-day Chancellor is still going to try to execute Not Goku. Hashtag all prosecutors are bastards. Also, a unanimous not guilty verdict isn't guaranteed even if you do everything right, as at least one of these jurors is purely random. So yeah, this trial, it's complete BS. Secondly, the notion that this game is surveilling your every little action like the NSA is also an exaggeration. Everyone wave to your NSA handlers. Hi, Greg. In actuality, the Millennial Fair is the only place where Chrono Trigger does this. With the exception of maybe a couple of NPCs later, the game doesn't track or have narrative consequences for every NPC you talk to, or whether you've looted this or that thing. Another thing I want to draw attention to is that the game is pretty clever to wedge the whole time travel to 600 AD quest in between the Millennial Fair and this trial. That makes save scumming much more of a chore here. You're probably not going to completely restart the first hour or so of the game to see if you can truly influence this outcome, because if you did, you'd see this deception for what it is. So why go through this elaborate farce then? Well, as a game designer, this is what fascinates me. Since this is all about choice and consequence, let's start by thinking about choices in other video games. In particular, it might be instructive to reflect on the times when player choice is done poorly. For me, there's 3 categories that come to mind when I think of bad choice design. First are hollow choices, where you're presented a choice that really isn't a choice at all. Something like pay 10 gold now or suffer an instant game over would be a hollow choice. If you want to keep playing the game, you're forking over the bullion here. Hollow choices lack conflict or tension, or otherwise fail to engage any sort of meaningful decision making on the part of the player. A second category of bad choice design would be inconsequential choices. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. What's the point of making a choice if that choice doesn't influence anything? Such interactions feel like busy work and can bog down the flow of the game. And for our last set of bad choices, we have uninformed choices. You're given a set of options, but you have no clue or way to discern what any of them mean or what the consequences for choosing them are. Or, alternatively, you end up making a choice as a player without realizing that you're doing so, thanks to a lack of signposting. Flip these around and you'll have a pretty good outline for what makes a good player choice in a game. The best choices are tough decisions requiring careful consideration with meaningful consequences that the player is either informed about or can reasonably predict. So coming back to Chrono Trigger here, it's really funny how the choices we make at the Millennial Fair are the full trifecta of hollow, inconsequential, and uninformed. There's no feedback before or after you do something that's pertinent to the later trial. No, everyone hated that for eating this old man's lunch. And as we established, it doesn't really matter if you act like a tremendous jerk here. You're going to prison to be executed regardless. But the game is relying on the fact that you probably won't discover this until you play through again on New Game Plus or learn about it from someone else. So, when you're playing this game for the first time, it feels consequential. And for things like the old man's lunch, the game is signaling to you to be extra careful with your actions for the rest of the game, like you can't just grab other people's stuff willy-nilly. So this begs the question, why bother doing all this? Well, I'm going to borrow an observation from a game design analysis piece by Patrick Holloman from around 10 years ago, which can still be found at thegamedesignforum.com. His analysis, titled Reverse Design, Chrono Trigger, was a huge inspiration for me to get into analyzing games myself. So let me share with you his key observation here. Using the lens of a 3-act story structure, I'd argue that the first act of Chrono Trigger involves all the things leading up to and including this trial, then the jailbreak afterward where we end up escaping to 2300 AD. It's here, or rather when, I guess, we learn about the Day of Lavos and the fate of the world. Act 2 involves our quest to defeat Magus, who we're led to believe is the one who summoned this Lavos. But after we defeat Magus, we learn the truth. Magus didn't create Lavos, it fell to Earth way back in 65 million BC. We eventually wind up in the Kingdom of Zeal, where events drive us to a direct conflict with Lavos in the Ocean Palace. As this is the end of Act 2, things go badly and Not Goku is killed. These first 2 acts are what the reverse design piece dubs the tragedy of the entity. In his opinion, Holloman argues that the trial's deception is crucial for priming our mentality as players. Our belief that our choices are meaningful and consequential is critical for this part of the game to land with maximum emotional impact. Because, in a game about time travel, we're clearly going to be doing things that change history. Right? Well, that's just it. During the tragedy of the Entity, we are not changing the history of Chrono Trigger's world in any meaningful way. The Queen of Guardia was missing? Frog was probably going to find her and rescue her anyway. The extinction of the Reptites and the emergence of humanity as the dominant species? Well, that was bound to happen, what with Lavos landing directly on the Reptites' lair and the resulting Ice Age favoring the warm-blooded mammals going forward. Guardia's victory over Magus and his mystic forces? Again, Magus was probably going to bite it by confronting Lavos, or yet again Frog may have taken care of things without our interference. As we play the game, we're meant to feel like we had a major hand in the progression of the world, but that's not the case. It's a stable time loop. These things were always going to happen. We go on a grand tour of the timeline and participate in some major world events, with the game signaling to us that this couldn't have happened without our involvement. This creates a clear ramp up to the Ocean Palace, which leans hard on RPG tropes to give us all the trappings and vibes of a final dungeon. When we confront Lavos here, after 2 full acts of the game pumping us up with the notion that our choices and actions matter, we might think that this is it. We're going to beat Lavos and change history forever, saving the future. But the future refused to change. Yeah, okay, you nerds. I know this non-standard game over sequence doesn't happen here at the Ocean Palace, but I couldn't resist. Go away. We can't alter history, and Not Goku pays the price for our hubris. This gut punch is intensified by how much we're invested here. The game pulls the rug out from under us. Our actions meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. It's customary to bring the protagonists and the audience to an emotional low point going into Act 3, and this is one of the best examples of that in video games. Still not as good as Final Fantasy VI, though. One of the most effective tools for game designers to get players invested and engaged with their game is to respect and to respond to player choice. This, however, can come with a lot of extra work. I outlined in a video on my other channel why games frequently avoid deep branching like this, which you can check out here. It's in the section where I'm discussing the Stanley Parable. But the short version is, deep branching tends to be prohibitively expensive to do in terms of production and developer hours. So the next best thing for keeping players invested is to convince them that their choices matter, when in actuality they don't. This way you, as a developer, don't have to make all that extra content, and you still get to string your players along by making them feel like they're making smart decisions or constantly asking themselves, what if I did the other thing instead? Hopefully, by the time they figure out you've been tricking them, you've delivered a satisfying enough experience that they'll forgive you for it. This is what Chrono Trigger attempts to do, and accomplishes quite effectively in my opinion. This leads me to ponder about this deception. Not only do I think a lot about why it works, but also about the circumstances or instances where it's acceptable to lie to the player as a game designer. This is quite like troll design, which I have a whole video on that you can queue up right after this one. Video games are an art form experienced through play, and a sort of deferred dialogue between those who make the game and those who play it. And when it comes to this experience, we game designers are the ones who have the power. I don't say this as some sort of egotistical flex. What I mean is that we designers set the boundaries and parameters of the game world. Through our systems, our level design, and our reward schedules, we have plenty of ways to induce certain behaviors and attitudes into our players. In this case, we're tricking you into thinking you have far more agency in the story than you actually have. Divorced from this context, this is a cruel trick to play on your audience. In this sort of power dynamic, it's quite gross for those who have power to deceive those who don't. So why is it okay in this case? Well, there's 2 major mitigating factors at play here. First is that this is just entertainment. No one is really being hurt here. And, even better, Chrono Trigger's deception enhances and heightens its intended experience. I would even say that the farcical nature of the trial is entertaining unto itself, regardless of how it also sets up an expectation that the game subversively pays off later. The second and most important factor is that this power dynamic is ultimately consensual. At any point, you can shut off the game and walk away. It's our job, as game developers, to create something that you find to be worth your time and your money. We need to make a game that is entertaining or enriching, or in this case, otherwise compelling. Because, at the end of the day, it's up to you, the player, to continue the experience or not. But what if this power dynamic wasn't consensual? What if we were in a situation where we couldn't set down the controller, turn off the game, and go do something else? Now, wouldn't this particular deception, convincing the less powerful side of the dynamic that their choices really matter when they don't, wouldn't this become something quite different? Something to think about, apropos of absolutely nothing, I'm sure. Since today is the 30th anniversary of Chrono Trigger, I decided to make this video and also a retrospective over on my reviews channel. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts about Chrono Trigger, be sure to check that out. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the thumbs up and maybe also subscribe to the channel while you're at it. Either way, thanks for watching.